So I went into the living room, and there I saw a copy of the September-October 2020 edition of Hadassah magazine. And it was open to one of those opinion sections where they show two opposing opinions, one on each of two pages that face each other. The opinion on the left was titled, "Why I'm Supporting Joe Biden," and the one on the right was titled, "Why I'm Supporting Donald Trump." Anywho, the majority of the Jewish vote, to my knowledge, is Democratic. I think. I hope. However, without a doubt, there are nonetheless plenty of Jews who support Trump, and apparently enough of them that Hadassah magazine felt that it needed to include their viewpoint in order to seem balanced. And when views like that are so widespread in my tribe, it becomes necessary to respond to them. They present their arguments as to why they think that Jews ought to support such a maniac as Donald Trump. And someone needs to take their arguments apart and explain piece by piece how those arguments are terribly flawed at best. And I intend to do exactly that in just a moment. Hello, Internet. This is Sophia, the Red Angel, doing my best on this channel to bring you quality material. If you like it, then subscribe to this channel, ring the bell, share, and comment. Before I get into the main subject matter of this episode, I have a certain self-correction that I must issue. My previous episode, instead of being a usual talking vlog, was a montage in honor of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And unfortunately, it seems that there was one factual error that creeped in. At the time that I put the video together, I believed, as many people do, that when she was appointed to the United States Supreme Court, it was to replace Sandra Day O'Connor. However, within an hour or so of the video's release, someone pointed out to me that she actually was replacing Byron White. Anyway, I checked out that claim, and it turns out that the person who corrected me was right, and that the statement in my video was wrong. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was nominated as the replacement for Byron White, not for Sandra Day O'Connor. Of course, by then it was too late for me to make any corrections to the video itself, so all I could do was make a note of the correction in that video's YouTube video description area, which I did, and make a mention of my mistake in my next video, which I am doing right now. So now on to the subject that I promised to talk about. Lauri B. Regan, the New York chapter president of an organization known as the Endowment for Middle East Truth, wrote an opinion piece in the September-October 2020 edition of Hadassah magazine titled, "Why I'm Supporting Donald Trump." I think that the majority of Jews understand that that is a very bad idea. At least I hope the majority of Jews understand that. But clearly there are enough Jews who do support Trump that Hadassah magazine felt that their view had to be included in order for them to seem balanced. So I am going to need to break down the article and explain at least the highlights of what is wrong with it. Here it begins. Donald Trump is the most pro-Israel president America has ever had, taking unprecedented measures that help Israel and Jews everywhere survive in an increasingly dangerous world. He is also one of the most patriotic presidents in recent memory. For starters, most patriotic? Are you kidding me? This is the guy who asked for the head of state of a foreign power, and not just any foreign power, but Russia, our old Cold War nemesis, to intervene in would-be democratic elections in his own country. This is the guy who confiscated desperately needed medical equipment from states in his own country, states which, thanks to him, had to go to great lengths to get them, all in order to offer them to who? To the dictator of North Korea. And the list goes on and on. Anyone who thinks that this guy is patriotic is clearly not living on planet reality. And pro-Israel? Please! The guy is friends with Benjamin Netanyahu, but Netanyahu is as bad for Israel as Trump is for America. While Trump is dismantling democracy here in the United States, Netanyahu is well along the process of dismantling it in Israel. These creepazoids, both of them, are enemies of both the United States and of Israel. The article goes on. Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, moving the United States Embassy there. Yes, Trump has built a small, temporary U.S. embassy inside of the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem. But as far as I can tell, it is yet to be clear how the permanent U.S. embassy in Jerusalem is to be financed. There does not seem to be any realistic plan at all to this end. Granted, the articles that I found to this effect are from 2018, and it is now 2020. But I have been doing quite a bit of searching to see if I can find anything more recent that changes this, and so far I've come up empty. So as far as I can tell, this move of the embassy is just a nominal gesture. But at any rate, when Trump moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, he did not do it for Israel, and did not do it for the Jewish people back home here in the United States. You know who he did it for? He did it for his evangelical base. He said very clearly and specifically back in August in a rally in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, that it was for them that he, quote, moved the capital of Israel to Jerusalem, unquote. And I think that it is pretty clear that by evangelicals, he means evangelical fundamentalists. That is, people who are convinced that we will all go to hell in a handbasket if we do not accept their religion. He went on in that rally to say, and I quote, "The evangelicals are far more excited about that than Jewish people," unquote. Well, frankly, that is not surprising. That is because for Jewish people, the important thing about Israel is that we have a place of refuge to go to when persecution of Jews gets too intense in other places. On the other hand, for evangelical fundamentalists, their interest in Israel is just as a pawn in their end-of-the-world scheme. You do not believe me on that? Maybe you might believe Pastor Nate Pyle, who I will quote out of an article from Newsweek linked to in this video's YouTube video description area. He reportedly told Newsweek, and I quote, "What kickstarts the end times into motion is Israel's political boundaries being reestablished to what God promised the Israelites according to the Bible," unquote. At any rate, sacrificing the very stability and the very hopes of peace in that region for something that is just a symbolic gesture, and as far as I can tell, a nominal one at that, that is something that is bound to excite people who care about Israel only as an end-of-days pawn than people who might actually need Israel as a place to seek refuge if the white supremacists that Trump keeps pandering to get too much more powerful here. Of course, Lauri B. Regan does not agree that Trump panders to white supremacists. Further on in the article, she states as follows: "Despite media distortions, Trump has never supported white supremacists. Indeed, in the aftermath of the 2017 Charlottesville rallies, he stated that the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans." Well, I did in fact dig up the statement that this quote is taken from. On the surface, it seems like a good statement indeed. However, it is a statement that was not issued until a few days after the incident at Charlottesville, and which was only issued after there was considerable backlash for his failure to condemn white supremacy up to that point. When a reporter confronted him about his failure to condemn white supremacists sooner, he claimed that his delay was because he had to have all the facts before he made a statement. Sounds noble enough, but let's see what statements he made once he had the time to get all of his facts together. Well, he kept insisting that there were fine people on both sides. Frankly, there is no possible way that that can be so unless you are prepared to regard violent white nationalists as fine people. He defended this statement by insisting that the fine people that he was referring to were people who were peacefully protesting the removal of the statue of Erwin Rommel. Oops, sorry, my bad. The statue wasn't to Erwin Rommel, but to Robert E. Lee. And it is important that I remember the distinction between those two people, because they were totally different. One was a general who fought very efficiently on behalf of a regime known for ruthlessly violating the most core human rights of minorities, but who many people like to forget was actually the bad guy of history because he had a nice, pleasant disposition. And the other was a general who fought very efficiently on behalf of a regime known for ruthlessly violating the most core human rights of minorities, but who many people like to forget was actually the bad guy of history because he had a nice, pleasant disposition. I have no idea what came over me that caused me to mix them up here together with one another. Anyways, Trump was claiming that there were peaceful protesters who just came to protest because they felt very strongly against the removal of the statue of Erwin Rommel. Oops! I messed it up again, didn't I? The statue, once again, was not to Erwin Rommel, but to Robert E. Lee. What is with me today? Let me see if I can get it right this time. Protesters who came to the rally because they felt very strongly against the removal of the statue of Robert E. Lee. However, as is made clear in an article that I found in the Washington Post, an article which, by the way, is also linked to in this video's YouTube video description area, there were no such protesters. The people who came to protest the removal of the statue of the particular general in question were pretty much all of the militant neo-Nazi white supremacist type. Make no mistake. Donald Trump panders to white supremacists all of the time. By the way, the two regimes that Rommel and Lee fought for, respectively, might seem similar, but in reality there is a very important distinction. One of those was a regime that was ostensibly set up to protect unrelated rights of its constituency, but very clearly had dismissiveness of the target minority's very humanity at the core of its identity, while the other one was a regime that was ostensibly set up to protect unrelated rights of its constituency, but very clearly had dismissiveness of the target minority's very humanity at the core of its identity. But there is one more statement in this article that I want to address in this episode before I close up. At a certain point in this article, Lauri B. writes, "In a world of growing anti-Semitism, as witnessed among the founding leadership of the National Women's March, within the Black Lives Matter movement, on college campuses, and even within a wing of the Democratic Party, American Jews must prioritize protecting themselves, not the social issues that traditionally sway their votes." This statement, of course, speaks to a concern that is very strongly felt by many Jews, and legitimately so. This is concern that no matter how much we support causes of social justice, the left will always fail to come through when we are the ones in need of social justice. That they will promote false narratives that whitewash our history so as to be dismissive of the oppression that we have faced and continue to face, narratives that dispossess us of our very heritage. These concerns are far from being baseless. I mean, just over the high holidays, the University of Illinois student body passed a resolution in support of Black Lives Matter, but embedded in it support for the BDS movement, a movement that very discriminately singles out the one Jewish nation on earth, a nation that was set up so that Jews will have a place to go when persecution elsewhere gets too intense, which history has shown very often does happen. Now, many apologists for the BDS movement claim that it is not about attempting to destroy Israel, but about seeking justice for Arabic Palestinians. But that is not true. It is a movement whose stated goals cannot be met as long as the Jewish state of Israel exists. Support for the BDS movement has also infiltrated many of the organizations that are responsible for a lot of the grassroots organizing in the Black Lives Matter movement. However, despite that, Black Lives Matter is not an inherently anti-Semitic cause, and those organizing committees are not synonymous to the Black Lives Matter movement as a whole. Instead of withholding our support for the very dignity of the lives of African Americans who are our fellow human beings, we should instead merely try to get those organizing groups to cleanse themselves of the very anti-Semitism that has infiltrated them. In the meantime, we do not have to actually go through those committees in order to support the very common sense notion that it is not okay that black people are disproportionately targeted by police brutality. And the hope that these organizing committees will cleanse themselves of that anti-Semitism that has infiltrated them is not a lost cause. The Women's March, which you also cited as an example of the left's supposed callous disregard for Jewish concerns, has done such cleansing of its organizing committee. Yes, it took them a while, but in the end, they did it. and to get the particular organizing committees in the Black Lives Matter to cleanse themselves of the anti-Semitism that has infiltrated them, we need to get them to remember the very thing that you are forgetting if you withdraw your support from their cause in the meantime. That being that we, oppressed minorities, are stronger fighting together than we are fighting separately, and that we cannot have the necessary cohesion if one group in the tapestry is willing to throw another under the bus when it seems convenient for them to do so. And also, as much as many of us may be tempted to think that this dejection by the left that we feel is unique to Jews, the reality is that, well, it is not. African Americans have equally legitimate reason to feel concerned that support from non-black supporters might evaporate the minute that Black Lives Matter ceases to be the latest, sexiest cause. I have even in transgender circles heard black people expressing concern that issues facing black trans folk were not being taken seriously enough by trans folk of other ethnic backgrounds. And speaking of transgender activism, don't even get me started on how the transgender community felt some years back with the kind of support that the Human Rights Campaign under the leadership of Joe Salmonese gave to a version of a non-discrimination bill that excluded transgender people from those that it would protect. This dejection by the left that we as Jews feel is not unique to Jews. And when you know what it is like to have the heel of oppression upon you, you have to be a real schmuck to throw another group that experiences that heel under the bus. And if you do not like it when someone else is that kind of schmuck, you should probably try to avoid being that kind of a schmuck yourself. Not that this is really the dilemma here, because if you think that you are helping Jews by supporting Trump, you are delusional. Yes, there are anti-Semitic people in the Democratic Party. Take the worst of them, folk like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, folk who clearly seem to want Israel to no longer exist. Trump is still just as bad for the Jewish people and for Israel as the worst of them. So even if Trump were running against one of them, it would be a choice between someone who is bad for Israel or someone who is bad for Israel, the Jews here, as well as for just about every other cause that I care about. And then there is the issue that it is not even against Ilhan Omar that Trump is running in 2020, nor is it against Rashida Tlaib. He is running against Joe Biden, who was the vice president in the Obama administration. That same administration assured funds for the Iron Dome that protected Israel against so many Hezbollah rocket attacks. Anyway, there are many other things wrong with Lauri B. Regan's article, but unfortunately, I will not be able to go into all of the problems because this video is starting to be long enough as is. If there is any specific point in the article that you feel that it is important for me to respond to, drop me a note to that effect in the video comments area. And though I do not make any promises, I might do a follow-up video on those points. Anywho, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please hit the thumbs up button and leave your comment in the comments area below. Make sure that you are subscribed to this channel and that the bell icon is active so as to increase the chance that you receive notifications when I upload new videos to this channel in the future. Share this video with your friends and everyone else, whether by social media or by whatever other means. And until next time, see ya!